This morning on the Ag Issues program. A pleasure, as always, to bring back to the program Kurt Kovarik, Vice President of Federal Affairs with Clean Fuels Alliance America, as he joins us on the program this morning. Kurt, good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Greg. I'm doing great.
Well, I appreciate you coming on to the program. And let's talk first of the news that was made yesterday concerning Clean Fuels Alliance notifying EPA of their intent to sue over the 2026 RFS rule delay. But this goes back to the announcement made in late June by the White House Office of Management and Budget on their spring 2024 unified agenda of regulatory and deregulatory actions. But a part of that was setting out the timeline for EPA to propose the 2026 RFS volumes.
That's right. Based on this notice from the White House indicating that they were going to intend to propose an RFS rulemaking in March of 2025 and finalize it by December of 2025 for the 2026 volumes, kind of surprised our industry a little bit because the statute requires EPA to finalize those volumes for 2026 by the end of October of this year. So indicating that they were going to delay setting that volume almost a year beyond the statutory requirement frustrated and angered a lot in our industry. And this is, coupled with the fact that we have a 3-year RVO program that we're under right now that EPA set in June of 2023 that set volumes for 2023, 24, and 25 that were woefully under what the industry is performing. We were looking to EPA to set volumes for 2026 on time and to some degree correcting the mistakes that they made in the current rule to put the volumes back on a trajectory of growth. So when we learned that they were going to be more than a year late, the industry agreed that this is not in our interest, and EPA should return to getting the program back on track, setting volumes on time, and setting volumes at a level that signal growth to the industry.
I want to take this in two different parts. This isn't the first time you've seen delay going back through the history, not only with the RFS delays that we have seen biodiesel tax credits. That's a completely different topic, but that is something that the biodiesel industry has had to fight for many years.
Yeah, unfortunately, when you have a nascent industry like ours that is dependent on federal policies to encourage growth and build out to maturity, it's hard to rely on government policy that's on again, off again. And, we've often said to policymakers and the EPA, if you were to provide us multi-years of certainty in policy, we would take great strides in investment in feedstock, which would help the soybean and canola farmers, the soy crush and other oilseed crush industries to provide that feedstock, and then the build out of the producers and the infrastructure to deploy the fuel. But when you have policies that are uncertain or backward looking many times, and you mentioned the biodiesel tax credit, how many times did we run up to the very end of the year when it was set to expire, and sometimes even after it was expired and then extended retroactively? And you have to say to yourselves, what good is a policy that is meant to incentivize an activity if you're only acting on it after the fact? So unfortunately, that's the situation we're in once again with the renewable fuel standard. And quite frankly, I referred to the 3-year, what we call the SET proposal that set volumes for 23 through 25. They were 6 months into calendar year 2023 before they set those volumes. So it's really, sometimes it's hard to comprehend the inability of government to realize the impact that they have on the private sector. The private sector drives on certainty. Every day business decisions are being made about whether we should invest in this new project or that one, what makes the most sense. And if the underlying policy from the federal government isn't there to support it with any degree of certainty, that slows down the investment. That slows down job creation. It costs income to farmers, and it delays. And one of the messages we conveyed to EPA strongly on this, it delays the carbon benefits of decarbonization of our distillate pool, and that appears to be one of the primary drivers of the Biden administration across all sectors is decarbonization. So why wouldn't the EPA do everything they can to implement the program on time and aggressively to realize those carbon benefits? Our fuel is, today is 75% less carbon intense than petroleum diesel, and it's going into sectors of the economy that are hard to decarbonize through any other means. Think about aviation and locomotion, maritime, home heating oil. All of those are relying upon petroleum fuel today that we could replace today. This administration seems to be driven towards electrification wherever they can. Certainly they recognize that there are areas of heavy duty truck and farm equipment and rail and aviation and maritime that can't be electrified anytime soon. So it's puzzling. The notice that we sent this week is essentially that. It's a notice to them to let them know that if they miss this deadline, we intend to sue to force action, to force them to get the rule done, proposed, and finalized sooner than their agenda would indicate.
And because of the fact that it would, or by law, needs to be done this year, it really takes out of the fact that the potential is there. You could see a new administration next year, but it would still be delayed due in part because you're flipping into 2025.
You're absolutely right. That's part of the reason we decided to take this action. We have not had conversations with EPA since the announcement by OMB that they intend to be late on this. We will have those conversations to get a better understanding as to why EPA feels like they can't stick to the timeline and get it done. But I'm sure politics has a role to play. And as you know, with the renewable fuel standard and biofuels policy, the politics aren't always black and white with respect to, Republican or Democrat. It has a lot more to do with, where are environmentalists on the policy, food manufacturers, obviously the oil industry, environmentalists have come and gone with respect to their views on biofuels. So all of that is at play surely in the political side of whether it makes sense to promulgate a rule prior to the November election. But, the RFS didn't include off-ramps for the agency in election years, right? We have to make tough decisions all the time, including in election years. So the industry is counting on this to be promulgated and finalized so that they know and understand the rules of the game. Just because it's a presidential election year doesn't give EPA an option of saying, "Oh, we're gonna put this off until it's easier to make this decision." Because quite frankly, in the renewable fuel standard space, there's no easy time to make these decisions. So nothing gets, I learned in high school and college, nothing gets easier by putting it off, right? So our view is there's no good reason or explanation to withhold and delay. They've already harmed the industry significantly by the recent delays and the volumes that they set. They need to utilize the 2026 RVO as an opportunity to put the program back on track. Delaying it does not do that.
And let's face it, the biodiesel industry has seen those ups and downs, but how much of an effect it has for those plants that produce biodiesel, whether they are running at capacity, whatever the case may be, and then it trickles down eventually back to your soybean farmers.
That's exactly right. And that's the message that we're conveying, and we're going to have a conversation with USDA about the same thing. Because when signals are sent to an industry to grow, investments are made. And we've seen that. Before the recent proposal from EPA, we've seen the announcement of about 20 soy crush expansions or new facilities, about $6.5 billion worth of new investment. And this is fantastic because it's right there in rural America, adding jobs at the facility. But as you know, the impact on the price of the commodity when you can crush the soybeans 30 miles down the road instead of shipping them to a barge and going, straight to China, you're adding that value here in the United States. So the expansion of the biomass-based diesel industry has a very tangible benefit to the rural economy of America. The 20 states throughout the Midwest, or 13 states that were planning on those soy crush expansions. Some of those are being, I'm not sure if some of them are being put on hold, but I would imagine that there will be delays in some of that build out because there's the lack of certainty. And we've already seen a few biodiesel plants shutter as a result. We've seen announcements of refinery conversions to renewable diesel being switched back. So all of this is foregone economic activity, foregone benefits to rural America, foregone impacts to our energy security and our climate and clean air agenda. And for what? I would ask EPA. What was the rationale behind not recognizing the ability of the industry to produce well beyond what they proposed in the last rule? What's the rationale for deciding that we'll leave the industry in the lurch even longer by not proposing aggressive volumes for 2026? And you have all this euphoria around sustainable aviation fuel, which I certainly don't criticize. Our industry is going to do what we can to support the build out of a renewable, sustainable aviation fuel industry along with everyone else. But when you have these mechanisms in place that would support an industry that is going to be the bedrock of the production of sustainable aviation fuel, and then you pull the rug out from under them, how do you expect the industry to support your intentions with respect to the build out of sustainable aviation fuel if biodiesel and renewable diesel isn't sustainable or isn't profitable because of market signals being sent by the administration? So it's almost as if one hand isn't talking to the other sometimes when you have these, very ambitious goals with production of 3 billion gallons of sustainable aviation fuel by 2030, but you set volumes under the RFS so low that it hardly makes sense for anybody to make those investments in, an additional product that's more expensive and more complicated to produce. It's just not going to happen, and that's the message we're going to convey to the administration. If you want those goals, which we share, there are levers that need to be pulled and action that needs to be taken to ensure that we're all successful. One of those is using the RFS to its fullest potential to grow volumes of low carbon biomass based diesel, which is biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel, and do it on time. So the signals are sent to the farmers to produce the feedstock, to the soy crush industry to provide those feedstocks, and then the industry to make the investments to produce the fuel.
Kurt Kovarik, Vice President of Federal Affairs with Clean Fuels Alliance America, is joining us. And Kurt, you had talked about the raising of the RFS volumes of what we have seen here the last 2 to 3 years, but you've also got some teeth in that behind Congress, both on the House and Senate side, of several who have sent letters urging that to take place.
That's exactly right. And this is, thankfully, this is a bipartisan issue. We've got support among Republicans and Democrats, House and the Senate. Earlier this month, a letter went from 18 senators, including Senator Roger Marshall and Senator Moran from Kansas, to the EPA administrator, encouraging them to get the volumes promulgated and get them out and get them raised for the industry. A similar letter went, I correct myself, that Senate letter, I think, went last month a letter from the House of Representatives with Tracy Mann and 37 others sending the same message to the EPA administrator, imploring them to get the volumes promulgated, get the proposal out, get it finalized on time to support the industry and America's farmers. So, rarely do you see something that has that level of bipartisan support with 37 members of the House, 18 members of the Senate, bipartisan and geographically diverse, not all just Midwesterners too, which is great. We've got folks from Washington State and Connecticut recognizing the value of low carbon biomass-based diesel and the ability of the EPA to support the growth of the industry through higher volume. So very much appreciate that support. We've always had longtime support from USDA. They've always been a champion in our corner to advocate for higher volumes and the ability of the industry to grow and produce even more. So we're hopeful that, we're going to continue kind of pounding the drum, I guess. We've got a few months here before the election where we're going to continue to make our case so that people understand the impact that the actions of the government have on, their pocketbook. Quite frankly, if you have an interest in higher values for commodities or animal fats or distillers corn oil, all of the feedstocks that we use to produce biomass-based diesel, well, then you've got an interest in this. So I would suggest to those listening, don't count on those of us in Washington that carry all the water. The folks back home need to hear from you. If government's not doing the right thing and it's affecting your bottom line and your livelihood, it's in your interest to be engaged in the process. Reach out to your members of Congress, write that letter to the editor to make sure people know. Thank the folks who are on your side and are helping you, and call out those who aren't and say, hey, we expect better and government needs to do its job. And that's what this is coming down to. We're not asking for anything out of the ordinary or exceptional here from the government. We're just asking them to follow the law, meet the statutory deadline, and hopefully send a market signal for growth for our industry.
One thing, I know we're going to go over here, but one thing I wanted to bring up to you, and that's, of course, sustainable aviation fuel and the clean fuel production tax credits, which we thought potentially we could see in 2024, but that may even change. And, of course, how can it be beneficial to U.S. farmers out there? It's a potential great future ahead, but still some issues with that as well.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Here's another example of government not recognizing what private industry needs to be able to operate. We had a whole host of clean fuel tax incentives in the Inflation Reduction Act that passed August of 2022. We had the first guidance put out for what we call 40B, the Sustainable Aviation Fuel Blenders Tax Credit, that was in effect for 2023 and 2024. And they just put that guidance out, I think it was around May 1st of this year. So almost 6 months left of the ability to take advantage of that credit before the administration put out the guidance as to implement it, so folks can understand how to take advantage of it. What we're working on now with the administration is the implementation, as you mentioned, the clean fuel production credit. And this is more than just aviation. This is all fuels that meet a certain carbon reduction. So for our industry, that means it's an incentive for biomass-based diesel, biodiesel, renewable diesel, and sustainable aviation fuel. The problem is that it's set to take effect January 1st, 2025, and we have absolutely no guidance right now. USDA put out a request for information on how to calculate climate-smart ag practices, measure them, verify them so that they could be incorporated into the calculation of carbon reductions for the crop-based biofuels, which we strongly support. We want to make sure the farmers get credit for the sustainability practices that they're doing on the farm. But that's about all the activity we've seen on this. And as those folks know in this industry and most businesses, you don't make those decisions for January 1st on January 1st. Purchasing feedstocks and writing those contracts is happening probably right now. It certainly will be in the last quarter of this year. So our message to the administration is You can't wait until January 1st, and you can't be late on this because our industry alone is producing about 4.5 billion gallons of fuel that will be subject to this tax credit on January 1st. And producers need to know what the value of that tax credit is when they're marketing their fuel. They need to know what the value of the tax credit is when they're buying the feedstock from the farmer, et cetera. All that can't happen on January 1st. And, for the signature piece of legislation for this administration, and, granted, there's a lot of competing priorities with implementation of that legislation. This is really going to be a market headwind for our industry in a few months if we don't have guidance out for the clean fuel production credit heading into next year.
All right, Kurt, we appreciate your time. I really appreciate you updating us on everything. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Hey, always glad to be with you. Hope you have a great day.
You too as well. Kurt Kovarik, Vice President of Federal Affairs with Clean Fuels Alliance America, is our guest on the Ag Issues program here on 580 WIBW.